I guess we'll go ahead and start then. Um, Welcome to the Hometown Mamas podcast, everybody. And we have a very, very, very special guest this week. It is my good friend, Allie. We went to high school together. Allie, how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Wait,
Well,
which one has the kids screaming? Which one is it?
Oh, that's probably me. Hold on, let me see.
Okay. It doesn't matter. I think it's funny. It's okay.
working. I
Miss Rachel's on, which means it's my kids.
that's okay. She lives in Breeze in this house too. So when I came to visit you the other, we were
Yeah.
talking about stories, and I was dumbfounded when you shared Diana's birth story. Like, just every bit of and part of it. I don't want to, take any part away from you because you've got to tell everybody what it was like. But I could not believe, like, the mental fortitude of women. Like, this is a perfect example of that. And second, wow, you're just amazing. You're amazing, and I'm very excited for us to dive into this because it just shows the strength behind women, but also how you said this is what I prayed for, and it came to fruition. Maybe not in the way that you initially had thought or anticipated, but when it came full circle, I was like, oh, I'm in tears. This is awesome. So
Aw.
Allie, if you can just share it like you told me
Yeah.
other week, I think everyone would love to hear. So
Yeah.
Yes. And let me know a little bit like about your other, because is Diana your youngest?
Yeah, she's my youngest. She's gonna be a year in a month from yesterday.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. Um, so my oldest was born right at the beginning of COVID. And things being what they were, we just didn't know anything about it. There was like, we were being kind of like fear mongered into a lot of things. Um, like I'm not like a big crier, especially not in front of others. I'm usually like pretty reserved. Um, and that first like prenatal appointment right after like everything with COVID hit, I like literally just couldn't hold myself together and like just
Oh.
started bawling in front of the nurse because it was literally, if you catch it, you could die, which means your baby could die. If you have it and you give birth while you have it, we're going to take the baby away and you won't be able to see the baby for 2 weeks. Your husband's probably not going to be able to be with you for the first 2 weeks. Um, just like all of this stuff. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is nothing like I imagined.
Mm-hmm.
So it was literally up until we had him, it was like, is Billy going to be able to be with me or am I going to go into this alone? And we lived in Pennsylvania, which, I mean, I'm obviously from the same hometown that you guys are from, so my parents are still there.
Mm-hmm.
It was just us. My mother-in-law, lived about 45 minutes away, but still like not having your family. It was, it was just different and, it was hard. So we ended up kind of being forced into an induction, which I
Mm-hmm.
had wanted to do. I wanted to have him naturally. I wanted no epidural,
Mm-hmm.
all the things, but I wasn't as prepared for it as I was with Diana. So we had an induction. I made it without an epidural until like 8 centimeters. And then I felt like you guys have had babies. So like whenever you have to push, they tell you like whenever you feel like you have to poop, that's when it's time
Mm-hmm.
to push. So I had that feeling and they're like, oh no, you're not close yet. And I was like, but I can't not push because it was so intense because things are different whenever you're induced. And, so they basically told me that my cervix was swelling and if I didn't stop pushing, they were gonna have to give me a C-section. So I needed to either get an epidural to stop pushing or get a C-section. So I was like, fine, just give me the epidural.
Mm-hmm.
So got the epidural. He was out in 3 pushes like an hour later. and everything was then, and all my kids are just about 2 years apart. So,
How
two
many
years
kids do you
later,
have?
3.
Three. Okay.
Yeah. So, 2 years later, just about, I get ready to have my daughter, Eliza. And this is when, I'm telling you guys, I trust God so fully because time and time again, He has just proved to me that His way is always best. His plan is always best. Like whether it's what you think you want or not, he knows what you need. So, and with Max, I was induced technically because of excessive fetal growth. So they thought that he was going to be too big to fit out of me,
Mm-hmm.
and he ended up
Mm-hmm.
being 7 pounds 4 ounces. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
big at all. My daughter Eliza, we were heavily monitored from like 32 weeks on, getting an ultrasound every week, being told anytime you come in, we could be like, you're going to get induced today because she was so small. And they were saying, so it was the complete opposite. Um, so we ended up making it to, and like by this point, we're living in Tennessee all by ourselves. We're 10 hours away from everyone we know. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with Max if I go into labor. Like, if I go into labor without anybody here, what are we gonna do? Or if they tell me, hey, we've got to induce you, what are we gonna do? And it's like, well, I'm gonna have to go do this on my own while Billy hangs out with Max at home until my parents can drive 10 hours here, which with my dad driving, it's more like 13 hours. So, oh, where'd Sarah go?
It's me.
Sarah, hopefully she'll. Well, I would just pause for like
Yeah.
your for a second. I don't know what happened. She may have lost signal. She will probably turn me up. Here we
Hi,
go.
Mila. There we
Hey,
go.
it is never our podcast without something going like that. So,
Yeah.
but you sound amazing.
Okay.
I heard everything. I think,
Okay.
I heard, yeah, I don't think I know you were worried about who's going to be there or what are you
Yeah.
going to do with Max. Is Max the first?
Yeah. Max is the first one.
Yes.
He's
What
the
are you going to do
oldest.
with Max if you go into labor because you're not around anybody? That's the
Right.
last part. Okay.
Wait,
Okay.
is it still recording? Like
Yeah.
we're.
Hmm.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Okay.
Yes, I
Okay.
see recording. It's still going through all that. We
Okay.
got it. We got it. Yep.
Have edibles.
Keep going because I just
Okay.
love birth stories. I wish Janie could
Okay.
be here, but this is so good. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So, basically, if I was to get induced that like immediately, then it would be like I would stay at the hospital and by myself and do everything, and then Billy would have to come home with Max and hang out with him until my parents could get here 10 hours later, because that's how long it takes to drive if like a normal human's driving. But my dad, it takes him like 13 hours to get here. So, um, it ended up being, and I did not want to be induced with Eliza. I, again, wanted to do everything very naturally. And I went to 41 weeks, and they had set my induction date. They were like, at 41, like, we can't let you go past 41 weeks. So 41
Hmm.
weeks, this is when you're going to be induced. So I had the schedule and everything. It ended up being on a Monday. And so my parents were able to drive in the Saturday before. We were able to spend time with them that Saturday and Sunday. And Sunday night, I went into labor
Oh my
naturally. And
God.
she was
Wow.
born the next morning. But I got an epidural by the time I got done getting the epidural, I was 9.5 centimeters because I was like trying to get into the mental space at the hospital. We got there, I was like 7.5 centimeters already. So I'm like moving and grooving, doing my thing. And they come in and they're like asking me all these questions while I'm like trying to focus on my contractions. And so that was annoying. But then the worst part was like, the nurse came in and she's like, I'm just going to give you an IV. And I was like, okay, I've never had a problem getting an IV before in my life. Like I'm got pasty Irish skin. Like you can see my veins from a mile away. Never had a problem. It took her 8 tries to get
Oh,
an IV in.
No,
And
thank you.
so on the seventh try, she stops and she's like, I'm gonna have to go get somebody else to try and get this in. And she walks out the door, and normally I'm like, I never say anything bad about anyone. She walks out the door, and I turned and I looked at my husband and I was like, is this her first day as a nurse?
Yeah.
He was like, kind of giggled a little bit. He was like, you don't want to let her hear that. And I was like, okay, I'm
Was
not
it
being
though? Because
nice.
I feel like after maybe two, maybe
It
three,
wasn't her, yeah,
you
it
should
wasn't
go
her
get
first
somebody
day,
else.
but it wasn't her
Woo!
first day, but she was pretty new. So,
Oh, bless her heart.
I know. So I was like,
Like,
she doesn't deserve this. I don't like none of these women. They're like delivering labor nurses are just like angels. And I was like, they don't
Right.
deserve this kind of attitude. So I was like, just give me the epidural, and, like so that I can be nice. So
Oh.
by the time I got it, I was like, why bother? Like I'm almost there. So Liza was born, great, everything was perfect. Um, but then with Diana, I was like, okay, I am going to have a natural labor.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I've been through this two times already. I know exactly what I want. Like, having had my water broken with Max at 4 centimeters, I knew that like things intensify so much once your water breaks. So I was like praying that I wanted my water to stay intact as long as possible. I wanted to be able to say goodbye to my kids before I went to the hospital because that
Mm-hmm.
was like a very big thing. So I wanted to be able to say goodbye to them. I wanted to be able to birth in whatever position I wanted to. I did not want an IV until after I had the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something else too that I'm forgetting. But I just like wanted all these things. And I wanted it to just, I wanted to be able to just be in my own zone and not have to worry about all the other like chaos happening. But I would have been fine with a home birth, but my husband would not have been, and that's perfectly fine. It's not for everybody. And also, if my kids would have been awake, it would not have been fun. So I'm I kept saying the whole time, I was like, we're gonna go to the hospital, but if something happens and she's born at home, like it'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started there's this wonderful app called Christian Hypnobirthing, and I started listening to that every day and doing the exercises on that. And lo and behold, this child, and this is my third child, so everybody's like, oh, you're gonna go early. You're gonna go early. Over 41 weeks, I went with Diana. I went in every week, and they would check me, and they were like, oh, you're 3 centimeters. We'll see you in a few days. I was like, no, I'll see you next week. And like and they wanted to do an ultrasound at 40 weeks to check on fluid levels. And I was like, I don't really think that's necessary. One, because I'm going to be paying for it out of pocket, and I don't want to have to do that. And two, I think she's fine. What's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they fought with me on that. And then they were like, okay, well, if you make it to 41 weeks, then we'll do the ultrasound. And I was like, deal. And like, I'm thinking if she goes like Eliza, then 41 weeks is going to come and I'm going to have her. And it's not a big deal. So my mom flies in early, so that we don't have to worry about what to do with the kids whenever I go into labor. And 40 weeks comes, they check me, I'm 4.5 centimeters, and they strip my membranes. Nothing happens. A whole week later is when my ultrasound is scheduled. And I was like, that morning I woke up and my mom's like, is there anything? Is there anything? I was like, no. I was like, I'm going to be so mad if I go to this ultrasound and I have to pay for it for nothing. And, so we like went to the park, played with the kids, walked around. I walked like 1.5 miles that day, and like nothing happened. I ended up coming home, getting the kids down for a nap, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to this ultrasound, and I'm complaining about it the entire time. And so we had only had our van for 2 weeks at that point, I take the van and I pull out of the driveway and it's like low tire pressure. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And I was like, it's probably just a glitch. I'm just gonna keep going. We live like 15, 20 minutes away from our doctor's office, which is actually inside the hospital. So I get like almost halfway there and I'm on the rim. Like I have nothing in my tire. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I pull over and I call the doctor's office. And I'm like, I can't make it. I have a flat tire. Luckily, my husband's like always prepared, and so I open up the trunk and get the air compressor out and start pumping it up. So I'm like massively pregnant, pumping up the tire on the side of the road by myself, and I call my husband, and I mean this van is brand new. Neither of us know where the spare tire is. And so I get it pumped up to a certain point, and he's like, just come home and I'll change it. And so I turn around and I start heading home and I get halfway there and the tire's at 15 psi again.
Mm.
And so he calls me because he's got like the app on his phone that like anything that happens with the car, it alerts him. So he calls me, he's like, just pull over at the state park and I'll come and get you. Luckily he was working from home that day. So he comes out to meet me. I'm sitting in the van, like going through the owner's manual, trying to find where the spare tire is so that we can get home. And that's when I get my first contraction.
Oh,
And it is real. Like there's no like cramping or anything like that you see in early labor. It is just real. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I start laughing and I'm like,
you
you
either
can't
laugh or
make this
cry.
up.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was like, you can't make this up. And so I'm like, okay, thinking about all the things that I've learned and taught myself over the past few weeks, and it's like, all right, timing is less important than how you're acting. If you can talk and breathe through them, or talk through them, then you've got plenty of time. So they're coming on like every 3 minutes. But I'm like talking, relaxing, like, cool, this is fine. Billy shows up, he's like, gets out of the door and he looks at me and he just goes, what's wrong? And I was like, I'm in labor. He like is about to die. So he starts to fixing the tire. I'm just like kind of like dancing and talking to him, and he's like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm fine. Like we've got plenty of time." It's the eclipse, by the way, and we're in a state park. There's people everywhere, and they're just like
Oh,
staring up at the sky. Nobody knows that we're there, even though we're just like right in the middle of all these people.
what time of day is it again?
This is like 2:30. When I went into labor, it was 2:30.
Okay. Okay.
It was 2:30 in the afternoon.
All those eclipse
Um,
people are out there. That's so funny. I'm
yeah,
just thinking, oh, the state park, like nobody is ever there, like in the parking lot,
no,
at least in Virginia. Like I could just pull in,
yeah,
but
yeah.
everybody's there. Okay, continue.
But I'm invisible because of the eclipse. Everybody's
Right.
looking up. Nobody sees like the pregnant woman who's clearly in labor.
with
So,
Uh-huh.
her, you know.
yeah.
Gosh.
So we get the tire fixed, and he's like, "I'm gonna drive the van. You drive the car." And I was like, "Okay." Like I'm in labor, but I'm fine. And
Uh-huh.
so he's like, "Do we have time to stop by the garage to drop the van off to get the tire fixed?" I was like, or to drop the tire off. I was like, so we stop at the garage and we're taking our time, and I'm sitting in the car just like listening to my hypnobirthing, praying. And he's like in there explaining like, oh, my wife's in labor and we got this flat tire. Then he comes out and he's like joking with me. He's like, so how are you doing? And I was like, well, I probably wouldn't sign back into work if I were you. And he goes, so you're telling me I don't have time to work out? And completely joking, completely joking. So I was
Okay.
just
Okay.
like, I was
You
like,
never know. You never know.
yeah, I
Okay.
know. I was like, yeah, you don't have time to work out. Like I would probably go home and let's get ready. And
Mhm.
so we go home and they're like coming on, I don't know, like maybe every minute, 2 minutes at this point, but I'm like still talking through them. Get in the door, Max wakes up, I hang out with him for a little bit, and then Eliza wakes up, I hang out with her for a little bit. And then I'm like, all right, I really enjoyed being in the bath when I was in labor with Eliza, so I'm gonna go get in the bath. Got in the bathtub, And then, and my mom's like, how fast are they coming on? I was like, I don't know, I'll time them. By the time I got the app to upload to time them, I couldn't time them because they were just coming on so fast that I couldn't get through getting the app uploaded. So it's like, but I'm still just like so relaxed and like calm and hanging out that I was like, can't be a big deal. Billy's like, what's my time range? And I was like, well, I was like, I don't know, like maybe a few hours. Like, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So he's
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, I'm gonna go get ready. So I'm thinking he's packing a bag, right? Max comes in, we're sitting and laughing together, and then he goes back outside to play with my mom and Eliza, and then it hits, and I can't talk through these anymore. And I'm like making noises, like making like primitive noises. And I was like, okay, we need to go now. So I got up and I'm like getting dressed, and that's when Billy walks in. He's like, what are you doing? I was like, we have to go. He goes, okay, let me pack a bag. I was like, what? Like my sweet, sweet husband has been like getting the chicken food ready and like getting things ready so that my mom doesn't have to do them whenever we're not here. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so we need to hurry up. So he's like, starts packing his bag, and it takes me, like, what do you think, Grace? Like, you've been in my house like a total of like maybe not even 15 feet. I'm like
Yeah.
it takes me like a long time to get 15 feet because I have to keep stopping to have contractions. And my mother's had 4 children, all natural, by the way. So I'm like leaned over on the table, like making primitive noise, like moaning and groaning. And my mom's like, are they intense? Are they intense? And I was like, woman, if you ask me one more time, I'm going to show you how intense these are. It's like, oh my gosh. So then I was like, we need to go. And she's like, oh, you can stay a little bit longer. And I was like, no, no, we need to go. So we get in the car, and like my kids keep wanting to say goodbye to me over and over again. I'm like, okay, but we need to go. We need to go. So I get in the back seat of the car. We start pulling out the driveway, and then he stops. And then the kids get in the car with me and say goodbye one last time. I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to go. And so then we finally hit the road, and I'm like in the back seat. I've got one, and we've just got like a Hyundai Sonata. So I've got like one knee on the back seat, one foot on the floor. I'm like leaned over the car seat, and I'm just like praying. And I've got my headphones in, and I'm just like praying and like paying attention to what my body's telling me. And I wouldn't say that I was ever in pain, like never in pain. It was intense, but I was never in pain. And so I just like, we're driving, and I can tell he's like driving fast because I'm like rocking around. And then we get like maybe a mile and a half away, and I have that same feeling like I have to poop. And I was just like, oh no, like it's been a few days since I've had a good one, and like I'm wearing pants. So these poor nurses, like I cannot do this to them. So
Uh-huh.
it's like just hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. And so I'm like, don't push, don't push, don't push. And then we like start pulling into the parking lot, and then I realize like, oh, that's her head. Like her head is right there. And so I start just like pulling my pants down, and I'm in like such a concentrated, like so focused that I don't like, I'm not speaking. I'm just assuming that he hears noises coming out of me. And so he's like knows what's going on. And so I start pulling my pants down, and he's trying to find a parking space. And then I like get my pants down, and I like put my hands under, and then her water breaks and she's out. She was born in the sack, and I caught her as he's like parking the car. And
Oh
so
my God.
from my husband's perspective, I'm thinking like I know that I'm moaning and groaning. He has to know that like I'm making these noises, that like something's happening. He said I was dead silent. He said I was dead silent. And so he thought there's no contractions. She's fine. We've got time. So he was like, I just was looking for a good parking spot. So he
Wow.
parked the car. He parked the car, and he said that as he's getting out, he hears a slosh, which was the water breaking, and he didn't think anything of it. He just thought
Mhm.
her water broke. I'll clean it up later. And so he goes to open up my door, and he's like, why are her pants down? opens my door and he hears the baby crying. And
Oh
it
my
was like,
God.
oh, the other things that I wanted delayed cord clamping, which
Mm-hmm.
these are all things that like most times when you have a hospital birth, they're like, nah, you're not gonna do any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he opens the door. He's like, what is happening? And I was like, oh, she's here. He's like, what do I do? I'm like, I don't know. Go get a nurse. Like, go see if somebody's there. So he like runs in. I'm just like hanging out, like holding my baby and like looking at her and just like enjoying like this amazing thing that just happened. And then like this nurse comes out and she's panicked and like then a whole herd of nurses comes out and they're all just like, oh my gosh, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm just like, well, if somebody could like put a towel up or close the door because my butt's just like hanging out in the parking lot midday. So, so then one of the things that my husband had packed were towels because in his head he's like the hospital towels stink, we're gonna just bring our own. So
Mm-hmm.
he was like, I've got like the nurse is like, we need towels, and he's like, I've got one. So he got one out of the trunk and like we wrap her up and like wrap me up, and then they decided that the best thing to do was to pull around to like the not the emergency bay but like the other one for the handicap bay or whatever. Um, and then they would meet me out there with a wheelchair. And so we did that and they got me out in the wheelchair. And by the time they got me up to my room and sat down on the bed, the all of the blood was gone from the placenta. So I got my delayed cord clamping.
Mm-hmm.
Then all good. Then I said I didn't want an IV, and they're like, actually, you're all good unless like something happens, like we don't need to give you an IV at all. And I was like, oh, cool. And so it was just like, and she was born in the sack. If we had not stopped in the driveway to say goodbye to the kids one last time, we probably would have made it into the hospital. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was just, and if I had made it to my doctor's appointment, they likely wouldn't have let me go home to say goodbye to my kids. And I would have
Mm-hmm.
had to labor at the hospital and not in my home like I wanted to. It was just like everything just came together in this
Mm-hmm.
crazy way that it it was perfect. And I don't know how you can know all that and think there's no way that God had a hand in this. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything that I prayed for leading up to this birth, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
It how do you not just like sit back and be like, any situation from now on, you got it.
I know.
I
I have
trust you.
goosebumps all over. Wow.
So yeah, she's my car baby.
Because most people, car babies, like that's like their worst, their fear, like is to
Yeah.
deliver a baby in the car, and you
Mhm.
got everything you ever wanted. And I feel like, they talk about the euphoria with like giving birth
Mhm.
naturally. I did not. I had one C-section, I got a VBAC, which was amazing, but I still had an epidural. But Danny talks about there's like this euphoria you feel, and the fact that you were
Yeah.
silent and you said you didn't feel pain because I felt pain, but I didn't do the, like you had like you had such
Mhm.
a good mindset, which they talk about the hypnosis and different things that you can get to that point. Um, so it was, I have so many questions. Oh my gosh. Um, what is, tell me more about what you were listening to. Like, what is that?
So there's this app and it's called
Mhm.
Christian Hypnobirthing, and it's this British woman who like started the app, and she
Mhm.
just there's different things like it's basically training your mind, like thinking leading up to it. I listen to it every day. There's a prayer one,
Mhm.
where it's just like you just say like it's just a prayer of like, please give me a safe and healthy birth,
Uh-huh.
however you deem it necessary.
Mhm.
There's one that's just scripture. It's just like just different scripture that kind of relates to giving birth and having a baby and being a mother and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And then there's another one where it's like basically like high performers and athletes and stuff like that do it, where it's you imagine the best case scenario, or you imagine
Okay.
exactly what you
Uh,
want, what the outcome you want every time. And so it's like you're constantly and just like every day.
Behind them.
Exactly. So you're prepared for it. And then another thing that it talks about is most pain is fear-based. So when
mhm.
you remove
Mhm.
fear from the situation, you can remove pain from the situation. And
Mhm.
so I wasn't afraid at all. I knew
Mhm.
exactly what was going to happen. I trusted God fully. I trusted my body fully to do
Mhm.
what it needed to do. And I
Mhm.
trusted myself that I was going to be able to handle it. And I trusted Billy that he was going to do what he needed to do
Mhm.
and what I needed him to do. And it was just, I don't know, it was
He talked
amazing. But
about it, didn't
yeah, he found a good
He had a
parking spot.
towel.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He did. He had a towel, he had everything. He was
But
just,
that's so funny because that's all you wanted at that time was to be
hmm
covered up. And it
yeah,
all, that's
yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. And I know personally from induced, I had an induction with my first.
hmm
Um, because she didn't want to come. I think I was like 41 in a few days. Um, and little old me was like, okay, I'm going to the hospital. I'm going to have this baby like today. And I mean,
Nope.
gosh, I went in Monday and had her Wednesday night via C-section because it was a failed induction. She was
Yeah.
not ready to come. Like she did not like any of the medicine they gave me. Like her heart rate would kept decreasing. So there was only so much they could give me. They didn't, so like I just couldn't progress. And they flipped me in all the different positions and I'm just like terrified with every contraction. Her heart rate's dipping. I'm like, it's nothing what I thought was like, I had always known, like my mom had to have C-sections because they were breech. We were
hmm
breech. So it was never like, for me, it wasn't a huge fear, but it was not my first choice. And,
Right.
so yeah, with my second, all I wanted was like not to be induced. I didn't want to be induced. If I had to have a scheduled C-section, that's fine. But which they won't induce you for that after anyways. But, uh, yeah, I know how how special it is to have your dreams come true with a birth.
hmm
And I got what I wanted with my second and it can, it's magical and it's just
Yeah.
it's amazing. And I don't know, I'm so happy that they were able to do that for you. Well, actually God, because it just
Yeah.
happened. um Gosh, and you were able to be so calm because I had like my body was finally contracting for the first time. I'm in my car, like I just like my mind was not relaxed. I was incredibly afraid though. Like I had went to the hospital twice and they kept sending me home and I'm like I am in so much pain. I have what's called like I think it's I don't know. It's like where you have really bad contractions only in the night and
hmm
then but your body's not progressing. And I had never done it before, so I call them and they're like, "Well, just try like folding laundry or something and see if you can relax." And I'm just like, "Okay, okay, I can't do this." And I don't cry. I normally don't cry. And that's when my husband saw me crying in pain, he was like, "No, we're going. We're
Yeah.
going." And so because I kept apologizing, I'm like, because every time you go to the hospital, someone's got to come over. It's the middle of the night. And on my third time, I was like, um, it was such a mind game. And I got there and I was thankfully 4 centimeters, but they kept me with 4 centimeters. You were walking around at the park or somewhere with like being 4 centimeters.
I was probably 5 or 6 by that point.
And
Can
Danny
I
had,
pause for a second and get
yes,
Diana and nurse her? Sorry.
yes, 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 get her.
She's a mess lately.
This is real.
Hi, baby. I'm just gonna feed her. Come here.
That is John. Hi, Mila.
Oh, sorry about that. She's just like a disaster the past couple of days.
No, you're fine. it's always I feel like it always hits at once. Like it's never just like a little bit. It's like everything
Yeah.
sucks. Everybody's sick or everybody's having a hard time.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I was gonna say, so you said something where you're like, okay, I know that it matters more about how I feel than how many minutes apart the contraction is. And that was
Correct.
based on your research or whatever. And I agree with that because mine were like the first time they were like every 2 minutes or whatever when I was in bed, but it wasn't, I felt fine. But I didn't
Hmm.
know little old me was like, oh, we got to go to the hospital. It's time. And
Yes.
they sent my ass home real quick, but it's okay. Um, but now I know like it was like, I can't talk through it. I need like, this is it. But
Hmm.
I don't know. I did not prepare how like, and just do all this research and I don't know, but I totally agree with that. It really is how you feel. Um, I don't know. That's pretty incredible. I don't know,
Well,
Grace. Yeah, go ahead.
I think too, you have to apparently you have to take into consideration how many kids you've already had because I was only in labor
Mm.
for 1 hour. So I went into labor at 2:30 and by the time the nurses came out to the parking lot to get me, it was 3:45. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I guess that's something to take into consideration too, that I was like,
Very fat. I
if,
know.
yeah.
Yeah. It's also
So,
crazy that all of yours went over 41 weeks, right? Or
um,
almost.
I was induced, 2 days before my due date with my first.
Oh, okay, because they were worried of
But
him being too big.
right,
Right.
right. And so all my kids actually were within 2 ounces of each other. So why is there balloons? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that.
Okay.
I don't know. Happy birthday.
So, yeah. So, um, so my first was 7 pounds, 4 ounces. My second was 7 pounds, 2 ounces, the one that was supposed to be too small. And then Diana was 7 pounds, 3 ounces. So it's like, when I was pregnant with her, they tried telling me like, hey, she's measuring on the small side. And I was like, I'm just
Mhm.
going to stop you right there. I was like, I don't want to hear it because I had both ends of the spectrum with the other two and they're about the same size. So like, I
I'm
don't
so
think.
proud of you for doing that because I like my first, they were worried the whole time because she was measuring small. And I'm a
Hmm.
first time, like I was panicking. Like, what
Yeah.
am I doing wrong? Why is she not growing? Why is she only in like, because as soon as she fell under the 10th percentile, which I think it was like 9 based on their
Hmm.
anatomy scan, not her actual growth chart, which was continually fine. But
Right.
I was terrified. And then they're like, oh, well, you be prepared. She can come. It's like, well, we might have to induce you at any time. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. And I trust every word that they're saying because I don't know anything else. I'm like, okay, this is how big she is. And then I have the I guess wisdom of the second go around where they tell me granted, she was 41 weeks. She was born 6 pounds, 14 ounces, so like a normal size.
Hmm.
And my second there she was measuring like the 90th percentile throughout. And they weren't worried. They're like I guess because she was in the 99th percentile. I don't know. She was bigger. She was born 7 pounds, 14 ounces. So like 1 pound heavier. And I just like, I don't know. But when they're measuring when they were bigger, she prefaced it like, and said, well, these aren't, I don't know how accurate they are. Almost giving me like, it's, don't like take it like you're gonna have this huge baby. But when the baby
Hmm.
was small, they were freaking the heck out. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so and half the time they used to measure my belly. They measured my belly with the first baby, but the second baby they like never took measurements. And every time they measured my belly, they said it was small with the first. So it's just enough to throw you into a tailspin of like what's happening. So the fact that you were able to be like, I'm gonna stop you, that's okay, don't even bother, is protecting your boundaries, protecting that while respecting like you're still going to the appointments. You know, you're making sure they're
Right.
safe, whatever. But I think it's okay to do that, and it's really really hard. It's not easy to trust yourself over this medical professional, which, you know, obviously not trusting yourself with all the things medical wise, but those
Yeah.
little things matter to your mental health and how your pregnancy is going to go. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool that you did that.
Well, not trusting medical professionals is a theme lately for my family.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I'm sure it's
Yeah.
hard. I come from a very medical like my family's very medical background
Yeah.
based. Like my brother's a pediatrician and my dad is a child psychiatrist, and they're overachievers, whatever. And but they are very medical based, and I talk to my brother all the time. He's he doesn't have kids yet, but I'm just curious when he does have kids, like how it I don't know. It's a little different. You can't just think like with a textbook so much and like what
Right.
you're told. Sometimes instinct and just mama knows is has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's and every kid is different too. So it's
Yes,
like
you
what
can't.
works for your one kid doesn't work for the other. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Grace, did you
Yeah.
have to have C-sections with the twins or no?
Yeah, actually, Jack was C-section
Okay.
too, and so with Jack, my water broke first, and I did not have contractions right away.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so how much time do we have?
Oh, what time
It,
is it? 4? Oh, yeah. Not too much. I mean, I can probably do a.
Sorry.
all these
No, you're fine.
with the twins, we can do like a birth story one a separate day, but it goes back to like trusting your body because the twins were scheduled C-section and every week. Okay, so I'm not a big person and I have a long torso, but the twins up it was like 36 something weeks, and Bo is measuring at 7 pounds, Mila's 5 something, and I'm like, that's like 12 pounds of baby, not to mention everything else
Mm-hmm.
in this giant, stomach. And every week that I would have my checkup, I'm like, I can't do this much longer. I can't eat. I can't, like, there's no room to eat. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
hungry and I can't eat anything. It's so uncomfortable. I can't breathe hardly. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm going to die if I go much longer.
Yeah.
And it's, my mom had come down to watch Jack when we knew like my date was getting closer. And it was 36 weeks and 6 days. And I was scheduled at 39 weeks to be like scheduled C-section for them. And they're like, every single week that I would go in, they're like, your babies are like, the twins are pretty big for twins. Even at 35 weeks, 34 weeks, they're like, I would not be surprised if you made it much longer. Like, having twins earlier than 38 weeks, most people have them before that.
Yeah. You went over that?
No, I was 36 weeks and six
Okay.
days. This was funny because it was a Sunday. My mom had come down. She was like, I'm going to church. I'll be back. Let me know if anything changes. So my first symptom, I went and took a crap. And I was like, I haven't crapped in like 6 months. So I think I'm in labor. And I'm like sitting there at the dining room table and I'm like, whoo, something's not right. I know I can't. And like in my head, I was like, I'm going to the hospital. This is enough. Like, enough is enough. Let's go to the hospital. I call my mom and she, I'm like, something's just off right now. I'm ready to like get these twins out of me. We go to the hospital and they're like, oh, you've been having contractions. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm in labor. Got it.
Oh.
It was funny because we're talking about like trusting your body. And I was just like, yep, I'm ready to have these babies. Something's wrong here. And it's like, Grace, you're having contractions, you idiot, whatever. But, yeah, they were scheduled, but as soon as we went in, they were like ready to get them out. There's no point in waiting, like whether, you sit here for more hours and endure contractions, um, either way. So they were born like 4 in the afternoon, November 26th of 2023. Bo was 7 pounds, like 6 ounces. Mila was 5 pounds and 11 ounces or something like that. So
Wow.
pretty big,
Yeah.
she was way smaller and she was born, she had the, what we think it was like sometimes when they're a little early, the flap in the back does not form properly.
Mhm.
It takes about like 6 months to a year. So that's why she had the issues when she was
Mhm.
born, choke all the time. And oh gosh, it was so scary. But with Jack, yeah, my water broke, and I didn't start having contractions until like hours later. So
Mhm.
uh, totally different. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, like I was laboring for about 10 hours, and they were like, "Hey, his heart rate and is dropping.
Mhm.
You're C-section," and I was like, "Okay, like whatever, as whatever we got to do to make sure that my baby is born healthy and
Yeah.
alive, like take me back there, cut me open. I don't care. It's fine." Like both times my husband saw my body parts out on the table, With the twins, I got my tubes tied after that because at this rate we would have had triplets. The next time I was pregnant, and everyone knows like he's gone for work all the time. I would love more kids, but I can't handle more than 3 toddlers by myself right now. So it's okay. Like three's a good number, and we're all right. But yeah, wow, birth stories. I think
Well, I think we'll have to continue this because I think Danny would love to talk to you, Allie.
Yeah.
She has 4 different birth stories, and would love probably talked a lot about the Christian hypnobirth. Is that what?
Yeah.
Hi, Kitty.
Christian Hypnobirthing. Sorry.
No, I love cats. Okay. Um, and I think dive in more into birth stories. Also, I want to hear more about your homestead and all the things,
Yes.
because homestead is more than a trend. I know that it seems to be like a thing that people are
Yeah.
homestead, but I don't have no idea how you do that or even what it contains. So I would love to have you on again and learn more about
Yeah.
that. But for the sake of our husbands and all our children, I know we probably gotta cut it now because
Yeah.
we could talk a whole nother hour about that stuff. But
Yeah.
I would, yeah, I want to pick your brain on all those things, and I know Danny does too. You're living her dream. um but thank you so much. You were incredibly well
Yeah.
spoken, and
Of
that was
course.
a really beautiful journey. Everything, Grace always uses the term full circle, but like everything it really just works out. And I'm working myself with like my I hearing all these amazing stories and the faith that everybody's having in their relationship with God and all that stuff, and I'm still getting there. And this is
Mm.
just it's just helping, like hearing all these stories and how he's just intertwined in everybody's life, and
Yeah.
the good and the bad. And I'm learning. I'm on my journey. I don't like
Yeah.
I'm getting, but this is really incredible. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you sharing that too.
Of course. What
Um,
was it? What's the Bible verse? It's I have plans for you to give you a hope and a future to prosper you and not
that's
to
right.
harm you. And that's like, man, is it so true. It's just so true. And he just wants the best for you. And even if it's not what you think is right, it's like, I could tell you so many stories, but he's, I just fully trust him. Like it took me a while to get here, but
yeah, I would
yeah,
love to talk more about that too, because I have like, even like in a safe space to ask my stupid questions, or like how to get like, like basic. Yeah, I would just love that too. I think you,
yeah,
Grace, and Danny would be great and I think a lot of women and people in general, are missing that in their lives, and we have so much anxiety. I know I do. Um, and I know it would be so helpful. I just have a hard time like getting there. Um,
yeah,
and I think I don't know. I think that would be a good talk too. All the
yeah.
things. But
Sarah, do you
yeah,
drink herbal tea?
no. I mean, I
Okay.
would. I don't have anything against it.
Text me your address because have you tried it, Grace?
Not yours, but when I had it, so my tea kettle and sieve is at my farmhouse that we're
Oh,
selling,
okay.
and here I just warm it up on the stove or microwave
Okay.
or whatever. So I am waiting to open it, but I do have it at your house,
Oh yeah.
and I keep thinking about it. Like, oh my god, so good.
So
Diana.
I make like it's called a feel good tea. I call it a feel good tea, but it's like for
Uh-huh.
anxiety and depression. And it's just like all herbs and stuff that we grow in our yard, in our
Holy
garden.
smokes.
And
Ah!
then I also make a balm that like you put on your temples and on the
Uh-huh.
nape of your neck. And it's like when you feel anxious or like overwhelmed or anything, you just put it on and it's like almost instantly just like settles your nerves. So send me your address and I'll send you those
Oh,
things. Yeah.
yes. That's amazing. Oh my God.
It's like the
Um,
aromatherapy, especially like we're just now getting over being sick, and I've been
mhm.
what you had gifted me, Allie. I've been putting it like even under my nose, my kids' nose, and on their chest too. It's like a natural Vicks almost.
Hmm.
It's been wonderful, and it smells so good. I wish I had
Yeah.
like a 5-gallon bucket of this. Seriously.
Just
Well, if you
lather
ever
it
need
over
more,
me.
let me know.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I'll be glistening all day. I gotta put that everywhere.
All right,
Um,
Kitty.
yeah. That's amazing. Okay. Oh my gosh, I just love learning about people, and you're all just, this is just so fun. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know
Yeah.
none of us literally, I'm in my car, you have your baby, everyone gets interrupted, but this still works, you know? It's
Yeah.
still going to be shared. Um, and it's hard when you're a mom to find time to do little things like this, but sharing stories like this is so helpful, even if it's just for us two, Allie. Like, it's
Right.
still like, it really does, I don't know, it connects us all. And that
Hmm.
is a lot of what people are missing in
Yeah,
motherhood in general, is that connection. Um,
absolutely.
all right. Okay.
I thank you guys for having me on. Seriously, it's such an honor. But I think what you're doing, it needs to be done. And so I hope you stick with the podcast. And if you ever want to have me back on, I'm all
Heck
yours.
yeah. Heck yeah. I'm not done. I could sit in here another hour, but I know I told, but I was like, just an hour. I got it. Like, anyways. But Grace, thank you so much for bringing Allie on here and sharing her. And I'll just group text you all. I'll share stuff like little shorts that I make and all that. But this will be posted on Wednesday.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
all right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
You guys have a good week.
You
Bye.
too.
All right, bye.
Bye.